I never thought my life would take this turn. In fact, I never imagined writing a post like this. But here I am, sitting in front of my computer, unsure if anyone will even care. But I have to say something. I need to get this off my chest, because I can't keep living in the shadow of what's happening. My name is Evan, and I've been married to Chloe for 5 years. But this isn't about how we met, how we fell in love, or the moments that should have been cherished. This is about the truth I stumbled upon, a truth that shattered everything I believed in. It all started with a seemingly insignificant conversation. It wasn't even a conversation meant for me. At least, that's how it felt. Chloe is a private person, and I've always respected that. She's never been the type to share everything about her day, her thoughts, her dreams, but that's not something I minded. I'm not the most open guy either. We had our quiet moments, our shared silences, and that was fine. It worked for us. But then came a night, an ordinary Thursday evening that turned into the most defining moment of my life. I remember the exact moment it all began. It was about 9 p.m. Chloe was in the living room, and I was in the kitchen, making dinner. I could hear her on the phone, and at first, it seemed normal. She'd been working late at the office again, as usual. I didn't think much of it. She was probably catching up with someone from work. But the longer the call went on, the more I felt like something wasn't right. I don't know why I decided to eavesdrop. It wasn't intentional. I wasn't trying to catch her in something. But as I stood there, chopping vegetables, her voice carried over the kitchen island. She was speaking in a soft, almost affectionate tone, something I hadn't heard in a while. I strained to listen, telling myself it wasn't my business, but I couldn't stop myself. The words she said next hit me like a freight train. You know, it's getting harder to keep up the act. He's too predictable. I'm starting to think I should just end it now before things get even more complicated. My knife froze midair, the sound of it slicing through the vegetables no longer registering in my mind. The weight of her words hung in the air like smoke, suffocating me. I didn't even know how to process what I had just heard. She wasn't talking about work. She wasn't talking about a friend. She was talking about me. I didn't even know what to do in that moment. Should I confront her right then and there? Should I say something? Or should I just walk away and pretend I hadn't heard? My mind was racing, but my body felt numb, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. The woman I had built my life with, the person I thought I knew, the person I thought I loved, was planning to end our relationship, and I hadn't even seen it coming. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. I quietly set the knife down and walked into the other room, trying to make myself as quiet as possible. My heart was pounding. I didn't want to know more, yet I couldn't stop myself from overhearing the next part. The way he looks at me now, it's like he's just waiting for me to leave. I think I should do it soon, while he still thinks everything's fine. I couldn't breathe. The sound of her words was almost unbearable. I had to get out of there. I had to leave before I heard more, before everything I thought I knew about my marriage crumbled into dust. I grabbed my jacket, left the house, and walked aimlessly into the night. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just needed to escape, to find some clarity, or maybe just to run away from the reality that was crashing down on me. I walked for hours, trying to make sense of what I had heard. I kept telling myself that I must have misunderstood, that maybe she was joking, or maybe I'd caught part of a conversation that didn't apply to me. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how deep the betrayal went. I had always trusted Chloe. I had always believed that our life together was real. But now, everything was in question. And then, as if fate had a cruel sense of humor, I found myself standing in front of the cafe we used to visit when we first started dating. It was a quiet little spot, nothing fancy, but it was ours. The place where we'd spent hours talking, laughing, making plans for the future. It felt like another lifetime. But tonight, it felt like a cruel reminder of everything I was about to lose. I walked inside, not intending to stay, but to collect my thoughts. I ordered a drink and sat at a table in the corner, staring out the window at the city lights, trying to make sense of the mess my life had become. That's when I saw her. Chloe walked in, and for a second, my heart skipped a beat. But then I saw who she was with. It wasn't a coworker. It wasn't a friend. It was someone I recognized, but didn't know well. A man. They sat down together, and the way they talked, the way she smiled at him, it was like she was a different person. The woman who used to look at me that way was now looking at him, and I couldn't take it. I had to leave. But before I could stand up, I overheard her voice once more, louder now, as if she didn't care who could hear. I can't keep pretending with him much longer. He's so predictable, so safe. I don't even know why I'm still here. That was it. That was the moment everything changed. I don't know how long I sat there, but I eventually found the strength to walk away. I couldn't stay in the same room as her anymore. I couldn't stay in the same life I had built for myself. So I left. I don't know where I'm going from here, or what happens next. But I know one thing for sure. I can never look at her the same way again. This is where my story begins. The moment everything I thought I knew about my marriage crumbled. I didn't go home that night. The city felt like an endless maze of shadows, each corner a reminder that my life was no longer mine to control. I walked aimlessly, as if the streets themselves could offer me some kind of comfort or understanding. But all I felt was a sense of emptiness, a void that had taken over the place where my heart used to be. I hadn't even realized how lost I was in my own thoughts until I looked up and found myself standing in front of the old bookstore we used to visit together. Chloe and I had spent countless hours there, picking out random novels, talking about our dreams for the future. I used to think that was the place where we made memories, where we built something real. But now, it felt like another lifetime. Another illusion. I didn't want to go in, but something made me push the door open. The familiar scent of old pages, dust, and coffee greeted me like a slap to the face. I walked in slowly, feeling out of place in a world I thought I understood. I didn't belong there anymore. My mind was racing, and my body felt like it was moving on autopilot. I grabbed a book off the shelf, not even looking at the title, just needing to hold something tangible in my hands. As I flipped through the pages, all I could think about was what Chloe had said earlier. He's so predictable. I'm starting to think I should just end it now before things get more complicated. Those words echoed in my mind, replaying like a broken record. But they weren't just words. They were a truth that had been there all along, hiding beneath the surface of everything we built together. A truth I was too blind to see until it was too late. I wasn't just upset. I was angry. Angry at myself for not seeing it coming. Angry at her for betraying me in such a calculated way. But mostly, I was angry at the person I had become. The man who thought his marriage was secure, that his relationship was solid, when in reality, it was built on nothing more than lies and deception. I hadn't expected to find clarity in that bookstore, but I did find something. A sense of resolve, a determination to uncover the truth. I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to let her ruin everything we had without knowing the full extent of what she was doing. So, I made a decision. I would confront her, but not right away. Not until I had the whole picture. I had to know everything, every detail, every secret she'd been keeping. I couldn't let her control the narrative anymore. I had to take back what was mine. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I couldn't. I couldn't just sit at my desk pretending everything was fine. I had too many questions, too many unanswered pieces. Instead, I spent the day following Chloe. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, not because I was afraid of what I might find, but because I realized that this wasn't just about catching her in a lie. It was about finding out who she really was, the woman I thought I knew, the one I had shared my life with. I followed her from the moment she left the house. She didn't seem suspicious, but I knew better now. I knew she was playing a game, and I was going to make sure I didn't lose. She went to work, of course, but after that, I watched as she slipped into a cafe on the other side of town. It was a small, quiet place, not the type of place she usually went. I waited outside, not wanting to be seen. I wasn't sure if she was meeting someone, but I had a feeling she was. I was right. It didn't take long before a man walked in, tall, with broad shoulders and a confident walk. I didn't recognize him at first, but I didn't need to. The way he smiled at her when he walked over to their table was enough to make my stomach turn. I knew then that I wasn't just dealing with some innocent flirtation. This was something bigger, something deeper. They were more than just friends. They weren't just talking shop. It was intimate, the way they leaned in close, their voices lowered to a near whisper. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I didn't need to. The way they looked at each other, the way Chloe's eyes sparkled when she smiled at him, told me everything I needed to know. I stayed outside for what felt like hours, my hands trembling, my mind racing. I wasn't sure what to do with this information. What did I even want to know? Did I want to confront her now, in that moment? Part of me wanted to walk right in and demand answers, but I knew that wouldn't do anything but make things worse. I needed to be smart about this. I had to plan my next move carefully. It was only when I saw them get up to leave that I realized how much control she had over me, over everything we had. The fact that I was so desperate to know the truth that I was willing to stalk her, to watch her from a distance, it sickened me. But I didn't care. I needed closure, and I was going to get it, no matter what it took. I followed them from a distance as they left the cafe. I could see Chloe laughing, her head thrown back in that carefree way she used to have when we first started dating. It was a laugh I hadn't heard in so long. The man walked beside her, close enough that their arms brushed every now and then. I didn't need to see more. I turned away, my heart heavy with the weight of what I had learned. I had no idea how deep this betrayal went, but I knew one thing. I couldn't just let it slide. Chloe had made a choice, and now it was my turn to make mine. I went back home that night, but it wasn't the same. The house felt different. It felt like a prison, like I was living in someone else's life. I sat down in the living room, the silence surrounding me like a thick fog, and I realized something. This wasn't just about infidelity. It was about the lies, the manipulation, the careful web of deceit she had woven around me. And I had been too blind to see it until now. I had to face her. I couldn't keep running. But when I did, would she admit what was happening, or would she deny it all? I didn't know, but I was ready to find out. No more pretending. No more waiting. The truth was coming out, whether she was ready for it or not. I had a restless night, tossing and turning, my mind racing in every direction. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Chloe and the man from the cafe. I couldn't get their faces out of my mind. The way she laughed at something he said, how her hand brushed against his, the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the world. It was all too much. I kept replaying the scene over and over, trying to make sense of it, but nothing added up. How long had this been going on? Was I just too blind to see it? The morning came too soon, and I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the cup of coffee in front of me. I wasn't sure what to do next. Should I confront Chloe immediately? Should I give her the chance to explain herself before I made any rash decisions? No, I wasn't going to give her the benefit of the doubt anymore. She had made her choice. Now it was my turn to make mine. The decision came in a flash. I wasn't going to play this game any longer. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I couldn't keep living in this fog of uncertainty. So, I started by gathering the little pieces of information I had. It wasn't much, but I had to work with what I had. I remembered the man from the cafe. His face was burned into my memory, but I couldn't place him. Who was he? Why was he so important to Chloe? I needed to find out more about him, and I needed to do it quietly. I didn't want Chloe to know I was onto her, not yet. I had to be strategic. I spent the next few hours digging through social media. It wasn't easy, and I had to be careful, but eventually, I found him. His name was Eric Lawson. A simple name, but the more I looked into it, the more I realized how little I actually knew about Chloe's life outside of what she had shared with me. Eric was someone from her past, someone she had worked with a few years ago, but their relationship had always seemed professional. At least, that's what she told me. But now I was starting to question everything. How did they go from professional acquaintances to something more? What was she hiding? And why was she lying to me about it? I found a few pictures of Eric, some with Chloe, and it only made my stomach churn further. They looked comfortable with each other, like they had a history that I wasn't a part of. It was a bitter pill to swallow, realizing that Chloe had been keeping something from me for so long. But there was one picture that stood out more than the others. It was a selfie of them together, arms wrapped around each other, both of them smiling in a way that felt too intimate for just friends. I couldn't sit with it any longer. I had to confront her, but not yet. Not until I had all the information I needed. I wasn't going to let her turn the tables on me and spin a story I couldn't unravel. I would go to her, but I would be prepared. I needed to know everything, about Eric, about their relationship, about what had been going on behind my back. And I needed to do it without letting her know I was onto her. The next day, Chloe was scheduled to come home late. She had a work dinner, and I wasn't expecting her until after midnight. It gave me some time to think, to plan my next move. I couldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment. I had to remain calm, composed. If I confronted her in anger, I knew she would just deny everything, try to manipulate me into believing that I was overreacting. I couldn't let that happen. This wasn't about me being upset. It was about me finding out the truth. I decided to follow Chloe once more. Not in a creepy, obsessive way, but in a way that would help me piece together the full picture. I had to know where she was going and who she was with. I needed to find out what was really happening, not just what she was telling me. That evening, I waited until Chloe left the house, making sure she didn't see me. I followed her from a distance, keeping to the shadows, careful not to get caught. She drove to a different part of town this time, a place I didn't recognize. She parked in front of a small, upscale apartment building, one that looked out of place in the neighborhood. I had never seen her visit that area before. My curiosity piqued. I parked a few blocks away and waited. It wasn't long before Eric showed up. He appeared out of nowhere, walking toward Chloe's car with purpose. My heart skipped a beat. I had a gut feeling this wasn't just a coincidence. This was more than just a casual meeting. This was something planned. They talked briefly in the parking lot, laughing and looking way too comfortable for people who were just friends. Then they walked inside together, disappearing into the building. I felt like I had been hit with a punch to the gut. I wasn't sure what hurt more, the fact that Chloe was seeing Eric behind my back, or the fact that I had allowed myself to be blind to everything that was happening under my nose. I stayed for another hour, watching the building, trying to make sense of everything. The longer I sat there, the angrier I became. Chloe was betraying me, and there was no denying it now. But the question remained. Why? Why had she done this? What had pushed her to make such a drastic decision? I had always been there for her, always supported her. Had I missed something? Had I failed her in some way? I left the parking lot without another word, but I wasn't done yet. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I had to confront her, face to face, and hear the truth from her mouth. But when I did, would she finally admit to what she had been doing? Or would she continue to lie, to manipulate me into thinking I was the one in the wrong? I had no answers yet, but one thing was certain. I was done living in the dark. This was the beginning of me taking control of my own story again. No more games, no more lies. It was time for the truth to come out, whether Chloe was ready for it or not. The days that followed felt like they were dragging, each one heavier than the last. I couldn't get the image of Chloe and Eric out of my head. I couldn't stop thinking about the way she had looked at him, the way she laughed at something he said, the intimacy that wasn't there when she was with me. It gnawed at me, like a slow burn eating away at my insides. I knew I couldn't keep running from this. I couldn't keep pretending like I didn't know what was happening. It was time for a confrontation. I spent the following day preparing, mentally and emotionally. I had to be calm when I spoke to her. If I showed any hint of anger, if I let my emotions get the best of me, I knew she would shut down, deny everything, and spin the story in a way that made me question myself. I couldn't let that happen. I needed the truth, and I needed it now. When Chloe came home that evening, I was already waiting for her in the living room. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating. I could hear her footsteps in the hallway as she approached the door, and for a moment, I almost froze. What if she knew? What if she had already figured out that I was onto her? But I pushed the thought away. I had to do this. She walked in, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. She smiled at me, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hey," she said, her voice soft, as though nothing was wrong. "How was your day?" I forced a smile in return, but my mind was elsewhere. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady, but with an edge to it. Her eyes narrowed slightly, as if she sensed something was off, but she didn't say anything. She just nodded and sat down on the couch, her hands folding neatly in her lap. She wasn't making eye contact with me, and that small detail made my stomach twist. It was the first sign that she knew something was coming. "I'm listening," she said, her tone casual, as if we were about to have some routine discussion. But I could see it in her eyes. She was bracing herself. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I know about you and Eric," I said, my words cutting through the silence like a knife. "I know what's been going on." For a moment, Chloe just stared at me, her expression unreadable. Then she blinked, as though she were processing my words. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. I could see the wheels turning in her mind, trying to figure out how to handle this. She hadn't expected this. She thought she could keep up the charade, but I wasn't playing along anymore. "You've been following me, haven't you?" she asked, her voice sharp, almost defensive. I didn't answer. There was no point in denying it. "I saw you with him, Chloe," I continued, my voice unwavering. "I saw the way you looked at him, the way you laughed, the way he looked at you. You can't deny it anymore. I know what's happening." Her face flushed, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of guilt, but it was quickly masked by something else, something colder. She sat up straighter, her hands now clenched in her lap. "Evan," I don't know what you think you saw, but you're wrong. There's nothing going on between me and Eric. We're just friends, okay? I don't know why you're making such a big deal out of this. I shook my head, unable to contain the frustration building inside me. Just friends. I repeated, my voice rising. Is that what you're telling me? Because from where I'm standing, Chloe, it looks a hell of a lot like something more than that. How long has this been going on? How long have you been lying to me? Her eyes flickered briefly, and for a split second, I saw something like regret. But she quickly covered it up with a shrug. It's not what you think, Evan, she said, her voice suddenly quieter. You're overreacting. We were just talking, catching up. That's all it was. You've been so distant lately, so caught up in your own head. Maybe this is just your way of coping. I felt a wave of anger rise in me, but I held it back. This wasn't about anger. This was about the truth. Don't try to flip this on me, I said through gritted teeth. I'm not the one who's been lying, Chloe. I'm not the one who's been sneaking around behind closed doors. You're the one who's been keeping secrets, and now you're trying to make it seem like I'm the one in the wrong. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor as she moved away from me. You don't understand, she said, her voice cracking slightly. You don't know what it's like. Eric and I, we just have a connection. Something I don't have with you anymore. She paused, her gaze dropping to the floor. I've tried, Evan. I really have. But something's been missing for a while now, and I don't know how to fix it. I felt my breath catch in my throat. The words stung more than I expected. She wasn't just hiding something. She was telling me that she had checked out, emotionally, long before I had even noticed. I wanted to say something, anything, to make it all stop, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I just stood there, feeling the weight of everything that had been building up between us. So what now? I asked, my voice hollow. Is this it? Are we done? She didn't answer right away, her back still turned to me. Then, without looking at me, she said, I don't know, Evan. I really don't. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't fully understood before. This wasn't just about infidelity. It was about everything that had been building up in our marriage. The distance, the lies, the things left unsaid. Eric wasn't the problem. Chloe wasn't the problem. The problem was that we had both let our marriage slip away without even realizing it. And now, it was too late to fix it. For the first time in a long time, I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know if I could walk away from her. I didn't know if I could ever trust her again. And I didn't know if I could forgive her. But one thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same. The days that followed the confrontation were an agonizing blur. Chloe and I hadn't spoken much after that night, and I spent most of my time trying to process everything. The truth, as brutal as it was, had cracked open a part of me I didn't want to face. I'd spent years believing in something that, in reality, had never been real. But now that the truth was out in the open, I couldn't seem to shake the weight of it. It felt like a heavy fog had settled around me, suffocating every thought, every breath. Chloe's absence in the house was deafening. She didn't stay at home much anymore, and when she did, she was distant, colder than I'd ever seen her before. She was there physically, but emotionally, she might as well have been a stranger. I was in a constant state of unease, never knowing whether the next moment would bring more lies or the cold truth I wasn't sure I was ready to hear. I couldn't get the image of her and Eric out of my head. The way they had looked at each other, the way she smiled at him, the way they shared their private jokes. It made me sick to my stomach. But what hurt more than anything was the realization that I was the last person she wanted to confide in. I was the one who had always been there for her, the one who had supported her through everything. Yet I was the one left in the dark. It didn't make sense. And yet it did. One evening, I came home early, needing a change of scenery. I had spent most of the day thinking about everything, the past, the present, the future, and I realized I had to make a decision. I couldn't keep living in this limbo. I had to confront her again, but this time, I wasn't just going to ask questions. I was going to get the answers, one way or another. I walked into the living room, where Chloe was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the television. She didn't even look up when I entered. I paused for a moment, watching her, trying to make sense of what had become of us. But I knew I couldn't wait any longer. It was time to ask the hard questions, the ones that had been eating at me for days. Chloe, I said quietly, my voice steady but laced with a hint of frustration, we need to talk. She didn't respond at first, her gaze still fixed on the screen. I could feel the tension building in the room. I wasn't going to back down this time. I was done being passive. I needed to know everything. Chloe, look at me, I said, my tone firmer now. She finally turned her head toward me, her eyes hollow. What is it, Evan? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days, but her exhaustion was different this time. It wasn't just physical. It was something deeper, something I couldn't quite place. I want to know why, I said, my words slow, deliberate. Why, Eric? Why now? What happened to us, Chloe? What happened to the marriage we promised each other? She looked away, her eyes darting toward the window as if the answers might be written in the night sky. She didn't speak for a long time, and I could feel the weight of the silence hanging between us. It was like she was trying to decide how much to reveal, or if she should reveal anything at all. I don't know, Evan, she finally said, her voice breaking. I don't know how we got here. It wasn't supposed to be like this. She paused, taking a shaky breath. I never meant to hurt you. I never meant for things to get this far. But they have, Chloe, I said, my voice tight with frustration. They've already gotten this far, and now I'm just supposed to sit here and pretend like nothing happened? You've been lying to me, sneaking around with him, and now you're telling me you never meant for this to happen? She flinched at my words, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. I didn't want to betray you, Evan, she said softly, almost as if trying to convince herself. But somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling like I was enough for you. And then Eric came into my life, and he made me feel like I mattered again. He listened to me, really listened. He made me feel seen in a way that you haven't for a long time. And before I knew it, I was falling for him. Her confession hit me like a ton of bricks. I had always known something was missing between us, but I never thought it was this. I had never imagined that Chloe could fall out of love with me. It had never crossed my mind that, despite everything we had built together, it wasn't enough for her. I never wanted it to get this far, she continued, her voice barely audible now. But I couldn't stop myself. I don't know how it happened, but I can't deny it anymore. I'm in love with him, Evan. The words hung in the air like a heavy fog, suffocating every breath I tried to take. I could barely breathe. It was like everything I thought I knew about us, about her, had just shattered in front of me. The woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted with everything, had fallen out of love with me and had found someone else. She wasn't even sorry about it. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was simply stating the truth, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I didn't know what to say. The anger, the betrayal, the hurt, it all surged through me, but I couldn't find the words to match the emotion. I had spent so much time trying to save our marriage, trying to fix what was broken, and all along, Chloe had already made her choice. She had already given up on us. I don't know what to say to that, Chloe, I said, my voice shaking with a mix of pain and disbelief. I don't know if I can forgive you for this. She didn't respond. She didn't have to. The silence between us spoke louder than any words could. It was the silence of a relationship that had reached its breaking point, the silence of a love that had died long before either of us were willing to admit it. I think you should go, I said finally, the words coming out hoarsely. I need some time. I need to figure out what's next. She didn't argue. She didn't fight it. She just nodded, her eyes filled with unshed tears. She got up slowly and walked toward the door, her footsteps echoing in the empty space between us. As she reached the door, she turned back to me for one last time. I'm sorry, Evan, she whispered, and then she was gone. I stood there for a long time, unable to move, unable to breathe. The truth had finally come crashing down, and I was left standing in the rubble of everything I thought I knew. There was no going back. The life I had built with Chloe was over, and now, all I had left were the pieces of a broken heart. But I wasn't sure what to do with those pieces. Would I be able to put myself back together, or had this betrayal left too deep of a scar to ever heal? The days that followed Chloe's departure were a blur. I could barely recall much of anything, not because the time had passed so quickly, but because I was so lost in my own thoughts, wrapped in a haze of disbelief. The house felt empty without her, yet it was full of echoes, echoes of the life we had built, of the love I had believed was unshakable. But now, everything seemed so fragile, so easily destroyed. It wasn't just the betrayal that stung. It was the realization that I had been living in a lie, that the woman I had trusted with everything had turned her back on me. I spent my days pacing, the weight of the silence in the house pressing down on me like a thick blanket. I couldn't escape it, couldn't escape the thoughts that consumed me. What was real? What had been real? Was anything about our life together true? Or had I been the fool, believing in something that was never really there? But I wasn't the only one lost in this storm. Chloe was gone, but her absence wasn't just physical. It was like she had taken a part of me with her, something I hadn't known existed until now. I found myself constantly checking my phone, hoping for a message from her, some kind of explanation or apology. But there was nothing, not a word. She had made her choice, and now, it seemed, I was left to pick up the pieces. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. She had walked away from me without a second thought, without any consideration for the years we had spent together, for the trust one had placed in her. I had been nothing but loyal, nothing but faithful. I had always been there for her, through everything. And this is how she repaid me? With lies, with secrets, with betrayal? I had to do something. I couldn't just sit here, wallowing in pain, letting her get away with it. I needed answers, more than just what she had told me in our last conversation. I needed to know everything. I needed to understand how she could throw it all away, how she could fall out of love so easily, so quickly. And most of all, I needed to confront Eric. I couldn't let him get away with this either. He had known what he was doing. He had known exactly what he was taking from me. I didn't waste time. The next morning, I found myself standing outside Eric's apartment, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know what I was going to say to him, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let him walk away without facing me. He had crossed a line, and now, he would have to answer for it. I rang the buzzer, my finger trembling slightly. There was no turning back now. Moments later, the door clicked open, and Eric stepped into the hallway. He was dressed in casual clothes, looking like he had just rolled out of bed, but the moment he saw me, his expression shifted. The cocky smile he had worn earlier in the week when I had seen him with Chloe disappeared, replaced with something much colder, much more guarded. "What do you want?" Eric asked, his voice flat, his eyes narrowing as he took a step back. "This isn't a good time, man." "I think it's exactly the right time," I said, my voice low but filled with a kind of calm determination. "We need to talk." Eric looked at me for a long moment, sizing me up, clearly weighing his options. He probably thought I would come in hot, ready to throw punches. But I wasn't here for that. I was here to get the truth. "I don't know what your problem is," Eric finally said, shrugging nonchalantly. "Chloe and I are adults. We don't need to explain ourselves to anyone." I felt my fists clench at his words, but I kept myself composed. "You don't get it, do you?" I said, my voice growing firmer. "This isn't just about you and Chloe. This is about everything she's taken from me. The trust, the loyalty, the years I've spent building a life with her. And now you're standing here, acting like you're entitled to everything we had." Eric stepped back, his expression hardening. "You think you're the only one hurt in this situation? You think I don't feel bad about this?" I didn't want to get involved with her, but when someone makes it clear they're not happy in their relationship, it's hard to ignore. I took a step forward, closing the distance between us. "Don't you dare try to act like you're some victim in this. You knew what you were doing. You knew what she was to me, and you still went for it. You don't get to walk away from this without facing the consequences." There was a tense silence between us, both of us standing there, the weight of the conversation settling in. Eric shifted his weight, obviously uncomfortable with the direction things were heading. "Look, I'm not here to fight with you," he said, his tone defensive. "Chloe and I, we're not some secret. She wasn't happy, and you weren't seeing it. You can't blame me for that." "Blame you?" I repeated, my voice low and steady. "I'm not blaming you, Eric. I'm holding you accountable. You knew what you were doing. You knew what you were taking from me, and you did it anyway." He opened his mouth to say something else, but I didn't let him. "I don't care about your excuses. I don't care about your feelings. All I care about is that you've taken something that wasn't yours to take, and I'm not going to let you get away with it." There was a moment of silence before Eric looked away, his jaw tightening. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he muttered, almost as if he were talking to himself. "But Chloe and I, we have something real. I don't know what you want me to say." "I want you to leave her alone," I said, my voice cold. "I want you to stay the hell out of my life. You've already taken enough from me." For a moment, Eric didn't say anything. Then, he nodded, his face hardening. "Fine," he said, his voice low. "I don't want any trouble. But you should know, Chloe made her choice. It wasn't me who broke you two apart. It was her." With that, he stepped back into his apartment, shutting the door quietly behind him. I stood there for a long time, the anger and the hurt still churning inside me. I hadn't expected him to beg for forgiveness. I hadn't expected him to feel sorry for what he had done. But what I had hoped for was some sense of closure. And that, at least, was something I hadn't gotten. I turned and walked away, feeling more lost than ever. Chloe had made her choice, and now I was left to pick up the pieces of a life I had thought was secure. But as I walked down the hall, something inside me began to shift. I wasn't going to let her or Eric control my life any longer. I had lost enough, but I wasn't going to lose myself. It was time for me to move on, to find my own way. But even that was easier said than done. I was no longer the man I used to be. The man who trusted, who loved without question. No, now, I was someone else. Someone who had to rebuild from the ground up. And the hardest part? Figuring out if I could ever trust again. The days after my encounter with Eric were a blur of mixed emotions. Anger, confusion, numbness. I couldn't seem to shake the overwhelming sense that everything in my life had been turned upside down. Chloe's absence was a constant reminder of what had been stolen from me. It wasn't just the betrayal of her being with Eric, or the lies she had spun to cover it all up. It was everything. The years we had spent together, the promises we made, the life we built that now felt so fragile. I couldn't stop thinking about all of it. But I couldn't stay stuck in that space, either. I knew I had to move forward, even if I didn't know how. The hardest part wasn't just losing Chloe. It was the realization that I had no idea who I was anymore. The man I used to be, the one who trusted, the one who loved with his whole heart, seemed like a distant memory. I had been so consumed by her, by us, that I'd neglected parts of myself. Parts that had been buried under the weight of our relationship, the routine, the daily life. Now, with everything unraveling, I had to rediscover who I was without her. And that was terrifying. I spent the first few days after Eric's visit alone, trying to process everything. I didn't go out. I barely ate. I just walked around the house, numb, trying to convince myself that this was just a bad dream I would wake up from. But it wasn't. It was real. Chloe was gone. Eric was still in the picture, and all I had left were the remnants of what once felt like a stable, secure life. I couldn't bring myself to reach out to her. I couldn't bring myself to beg for closure, because I knew it wouldn't come. Chloe had made her decision. She had made her choice, and it wasn't me. It wasn't even close. She had chosen him. And now, I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered heart and shattered life. But that didn't stop the questions. It didn't stop the need for answers. I still couldn't understand what had happened, why things had fallen apart so suddenly. Was it something I had done? Was I to blame? I had spent years making her feel loved, making her feel supported. I had given her everything I had, and yet it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to keep her. There was a part of me that wanted to lash out, to demand answers from Chloe, to confront her with everything I knew. But I knew that wouldn't solve anything. It would only bring more pain, more anger, more resentment. I had to let go, but letting go was the hardest thing I'd ever had to do. It wasn't just a breakup. It wasn't just losing a lover. It was losing a part of myself, the part that had believed in love, in trust, in loyalty. I spent the next few weeks trying to focus on work, trying to distract myself from the emptiness that was growing inside me. But every moment outside the office felt like a constant reminder of what I had lost. I went through the motions, waking up, going to work, eating when I remembered to, sleeping when exhaustion forced me to, but I wasn't really living. Not anymore. And then, one night, something changed. I was at a bar, sitting alone at a table, nursing a drink. It wasn't something I did often, but I needed to get out of the house, to feel like I was still a part of the world. I was lost in my thoughts when I felt someone sit down across from me. I didn't look up right away, thinking it was just another stranger passing through. But then I heard the voice. Evan. I froze, the sound of her name almost breaking me. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. I knew that voice, the one I had once spent hours listening to. I knew the warmth of her smile, the softness in her words. But now, it was all different. There was a distance between us, a chasm I wasn't sure we could ever cross. I finally looked up, and there she was. Chloe. She looked the same, but different. Her eyes were tired, darker than I remembered. She looked like she hadn't been sleeping well, her shoulders slumped as if carrying a weight she didn't know how to shed. She wasn't the woman I had known. She was a stranger, and yet, She wasn't. What are you doing here? I asked, the words coming out colder than I intended. I didn't mean to sound harsh, but I couldn't help it. Seeing her again after everything that had happened felt like a punch to the gut. I needed to talk to you, she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the noise of the bar. I didn't know where else to go. I sat there, silent, trying to control the wave of emotions flooding through me. I wanted to ask her a million questions, but none of them seemed right. None of them seemed like they would bring me any closer to the truth. Talk about what? I asked, my voice trembling slightly, despite my best efforts to keep it steady. What's left to say, Chloe? You've made your choice. You've made it very clear where you stand. Her eyes welled up with tears, and for a moment, I thought she was going to break down. But instead, she reached for the drink in front of her and took a long sip before meeting my gaze again. I know, she said softly. I know I hurt you. I know I made the wrong choice. But Evan, I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you. I looked at her, my heart torn in two. I wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that she was truly sorry. But the truth was, I didn't know if I could trust her anymore. How could I? After everything? You're sorry? I repeated, almost incredulously. Chloe, that's not enough. Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't undo the damage you've done. You left me. You walked away from everything we built, and now you want to sit here and tell me you're sorry? She flinched, as though my words physically hurt her. I didn't care. She needed to hear this. She needed to understand the gravity of what she had done. I never wanted to leave you, she said, her voice cracking. But I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know how to fix things. I was lost, Evan. I felt like I was losing myself, and I didn't know how to get it back. I let her words hang in the air, heavy with the weight of everything that had gone wrong between us. I couldn't find the words to respond, because what was there to say? I wanted to tell her that I understood, that I could forgive her, that I could accept what had happened and move on. But I couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I don't know what you want from me, Chloe, I said finally, my voice low. I don't know if I can forgive you for this. I don't even know if I want to try anymore. She looked down, her tears falling silently onto the table. I just wanted you to know how sorry I am, she whispered. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. And with that, she stood up, leaving me sitting there in the dimly lit bar, her words echoing in my mind. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. The life I had with Chloe was gone, and no amount of apologies could bring it back. For the first time in weeks, I felt something stir inside me. It wasn't hope exactly, but it was a flicker of something. Maybe it was the beginning of acceptance, or maybe it was the realization that I could finally let go. Either way, I knew I had to move on. It's strange how life works. 1 minute, everything feels like it's falling apart, and the next, you realize that breaking apart was the first step toward becoming whole again. I didn't know it then, sitting in that bar, watching Chloe walk away for the last time. But in that moment, I knew something deep down had changed. It wasn't about forgiveness, not yet. It wasn't about getting closure or understanding the why of it all. It was about me, about finding the strength to take control of my own story. Chloe's departure, painful as it was, had been a wake-up call. I had spent so much of my life wrapped up in someone else's dreams, someone else's version of happiness, that I forgot what my own looked like. I had lost myself in the relationship, forgotten the things I loved doing, the passions I had once pursued, the person I was before her. But I was starting to find myself again, slowly, bit by bit. I spent the next few months figuring out who I was, outside of the hurt, outside of the mess Chloe had left behind. I started running in the mornings again, something I had stopped doing a long time ago. I began painting again, something I hadn't touched in years. I reached out to old friends I had neglected, people who reminded me of the person I used to be. I went back to therapy, not just to understand the pain, but to heal from it, to learn how to move forward. And, somewhere along the way, I began to feel a kind of peace. Not the kind where everything is magically fixed, where the past is forgotten, but the kind where you realize that the future is still yours to shape, and that healing is a choice, even when it feels impossible. I didn't hear from Chloe for a long time after that night in the bar. Part of me wanted to know how she was doing, if she was okay. But the other part of me knew that I couldn't keep looking back, couldn't keep checking to see if she was happy with Eric or if she regretted her choices. I had to focus on myself now. I had to move on, not for her, but for me. It wasn't easy. Some days, I still thought about her, about what we had lost. But the more I focused on rebuilding my own life, the less I thought about the life we had shared. The less I thought about the person she had been, and the more I thought about the person I could become. One day, I ran into someone. Her name was Maya, and we met at a coffee shop a few months after everything with Chloe ended. She was kind, easy to talk to, and her smile was the kind that made me feel like it was okay to laugh again. We started talking, then started spending more time together. At first, it was just casual, lunch, drinks, getting to know each other. But something began to shift inside me. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed the simple joy of connecting with someone new. And more than that, I realized that, somewhere along the way, I had started feeling something for her. Something that wasn't clouded by the past, something fresh and light. Maya wasn't a replacement for Chloe, and I wasn't trying to make her one. She was just Maya, and that was enough. As we spent more time together, I realized that I wasn't the same person I had been. I had learned so much about myself in the months after Chloe left, and now, with Maya, I could see the possibility of building something new, something real. I wasn't rushing anything. I wasn't expecting perfection. But for the first time in a long time, I was hopeful. There's something beautiful about healing. It's not a straight line, and it's not easy, but it's possible. I had come to understand that happiness wasn't something someone else could give me. It wasn't something that depended on a relationship or a future with someone else. It was something I had to find within myself, something I had to cultivate. And so, I moved forward, not because I had forgotten the pain, but because I had learned to live with it. Not because I had forgiven Chloe, but because I had found the strength to forgive myself. Life had a way of teaching you lessons when you least expected it. And, slowly but surely, I had learned to embrace those lessons, to let go of the things that held me back, and to move forward into a future I wasn't afraid of anymore. Maya and I are still seeing each other. Who knows where it'll go, but for now, I'm just enjoying the moments, the laughter, the easy conversation, the feeling of being seen and heard. And more than that, I'm learning to see and hear myself again. The road ahead is uncertain, and maybe that's okay. Maybe the best thing I can do now is simply keep walking it, one step at a time, knowing that I am no longer the person I once was. I'm stronger, I'm wiser, and most importantly, I'm free. And that freedom, the freedom to choose my own happiness, to embrace the unknown, is the most beautiful thing I've ever felt. That's the lesson I learned from it all. Life doesn't always go as planned. People disappoint us. But in the end, the only thing we truly have is the power to pick ourselves up, move forward, and build the life we want, one piece at a time.